I'm Sean Fennessey, and this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about Anora and the Best Picture race. Today on the show, Amanda and I are discussing the 8th feature film from writer-director Sean Baker, his Palme d'Or-winning sensation, Anora. We talk about the movie in a spoiler-free way for a stretch, and there is a spoiler warning to heed for those of you who do not want to know too much about this movie before you see it. You are going to want to see it. It's a movie we're going to be talking about on this show for the next 5 months or so. The movie is expanding around the country over the next couple weeks, and you will get an opportunity. But first, before we dig into Anora, I'm going to attempt to construct the first Best Picture power rankings of the season. And it's not easy. I've got an A to Z lineup of films that I'm going to run through. That's right, where I sit, there are at least 26 contenders for Best Picture at the moment. Sure, there are a few frontrunners we can talk about, but there's definitely not an Oppenheimer in sight. I'm not even sure there's a Parasite on the board this year. I can't think of a time this late in the year when things were so unsettled. We've gotten used to dominant runs with Oppenheimer and Everything Everywhere All at Once these past 2 years. And even in 2021 and 2020, which were compromised by the pandemic, there were long gestating frontrunners like Coda and The Power of the Dog and Nomadland. This year is totally different. So walk with me as I share all of these 26 potential contenders, where they sit, and in real time, how I put them in a descending order from 10 to 1. I don't entirely know how I'm going to do this, but just roll with me, please. So I'm doing it in alphabetical order. These are the Best Picture contenders. All We Imagine Is Light. This is Payal Kapadia's Indian film that was not selected for the Best International Feature Oscar, and you'd think that that would doom its Oscar chances, but I know that the film is going to have a campaign not just for that category, but also for Best Picture. This is a film, this is one of 6 films on my list of 26 that I haven't seen yet. Now, I'm going to do my best to make smart choices about these films I haven't seen yet. This is fairly common on October 21st, that there's a handful of movies that aren't out yet. This movie comes out on November 15th. It would be very unusual for a film that has not been selected by its home nation to represent it in the international feature race to get nominated. For now, I'm feeling like this is not going to happen, but you never know. Next, alphabetically on the list, Anora. You'll hear a lot more about this movie when we get to it in about 15 minutes on the pod. But until then, I can assure you, this movie is competing for Best Picture. It is competing hard. If there are frontrunners this year, I'm not sure if there are, but if there are, this is one of them. I've got this greened on my board already. So Anora is rolling for sure. Next, alphabetically, Blitz. Another film I haven't seen, I'm seeing very soon. This is Steve McQueen's World War II drama starring Saoirse Ronan. It's an Apple TV Plus film. It will be opening on November 1st around the country, though not in every movie theater around the country. And then I believe it hits the service on November 22nd. This film premiered at the London Film Festival. It played the New York Film Festival. It's gotten softer reviews than I expected, is what I would say. There's been a lot of curiosity about this movie because it did not hit the traditional festival circuit, didn't play Cannes, didn't play Venice, didn't play Telluride. Now that it's out in the world, it feels like it has been a modest reception. That doesn't mean it's not going to compete with the Academy because, as we know, the Academy and the critics are not the same. After Blitz, it's time to talk about The Brutalist. We mentioned it last week. Rapturous reviews out of the New York Film Festival, after rapturous reviews out of Venice. A24 just premiered this film's poster. It's a very good poster. By the time you listen to this, there probably will be a trailer. I'm pretty nuts about this movie. I'm seeing it a second time next week. I really, really like it, while also I can acknowledge that this is a critic's favorite. This is a film of great power. I believe the word monumental was cited on that poster as noted in several reviews in several different outlets. It's a big, bold movie about big, bold ideas. I do think it's going to resonate with the Academy. I'm not sure how strongly. It feels like the kind of movie that gets many, many, many below-the-line nominations. Whether or not it sways people for victory, we'll see. But I think it is among the top tier of contenders right now. And I've got about 5 of them that I think are almost certainly going to get into this race. It's the next 5 that are pretty confusing. So let's say Anora's in, let's say The Brutalist's in. Challengers. I thought challengers would be doing better at this point of the race. I thought that Queer, Luca Guadagnino's movie, which I'll talk about in a minute, would be received in a somewhat mixed way, and it has been. And I thought that that would allow challengers the riotously fun love triangle romance tennis comedy that came out earlier this year that is, I know, among Amanda's favorite movies of the year, that is among my favorite movies of the year, a chance to go up a level. But it's possible that its genre and its tonality and its relationship to sex in the human body is being held against it. We shall see. I'm not totally writing it off, but right now I'm not sure if it's going to make its way in. So I'm not pushing it forward. Then there's A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic from James Mangold starring Timothée Chalamet. We've now seen a teaser and a trailer. I'm concerned, as listeners of this show know. This is a movie that could mean a great deal to me or could be incredibly frustrating. We shall see. It's not coming out until Christmas. I don't know when we're going to see it. I hope to see it soon. I would have thought 3 months ago that this film was a lock. Now I'm not so sure. Because this year is somewhat up in the air, it feels like it has a better chance than usual, and it will play pretty straightforwardly for those who love music biopics. We know that this is a movie from the man who made Walk the Line. As recently as 5 years ago, Bohemian Rhapsody was winning Academy Awards. So anything's possible here. It's not in my top tier of contenders at the moment, though. What is? 3 consecutive titles I'll tell you about quickly. One is Conclave. This is Edward Berger's new mystery drama about the selection of a new pope that I saw at a Telluride starring Ralph Fiennes that I thought was absolutely delightful. I'm not sure if this is a great film. It's a very entertaining movie. It's a movie that I think is going to be very easy to play when you're sitting at home and looking at your screeners as an Academy voter or a Guild voter. It's got a compelling story at the center of it. It's got a lot of actors that you really like watching. Stanley Tucci, Isabella Rossellini, Jonathan Lithgow. Familiar faces in darkened rooms talking about conspiracies. That's just good stuff. People like that. I think people are really going to like this movie. I'm not sure if it's an actual contender for Best Picture insofar as can it win, but it feels like a movie that will be very easy for people to check off because they're just going to have fun watching it. So Conclave, yes. That brings us to Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2, I think, especially with some new information that I'll get to momentarily, is the best chance for a strong blockbuster presence at the Academy Awards this year. This is a movie that everyone agrees is a step up from the original. Denis Villeneuve has not been really truly recognized by the Academy yet. I think he still has a strong chance to be recognized for Best Director. Sure, the third film in the Dune trilogy is awaited, and there may be some Lord of the Rings style withholding in terms of appreciation and support for Part 2. If I had to guess, this certainly feels like it's going to be the Empire Strikes Back of this series, the best film in this series, the film that has the deepest thematic ideas and also the most visual grandeur. So I'm saying Dune Part 2 is a lock to get into the Best Picture race this year. Next film, Emilia Perez. I told you about this movie after Telluride. Jacques Audiard, his incredibly audacious, multinational, multi-conceptual musical story of a drug dealer who becomes ensnared in a complex family drama and a criminal drama. This is a movie that has flummoxed some and thrilled others. It stars Carla Sofia Gascon, Selena Gomez, Zoe Saldana. They all give bold performances in a film with a bold script that is based on an opera. Audiard, a French filmmaker. This film is eligible for Best International Feature from France, even though it's largely set in Mexico, which is somewhat confusing. I think that this movie has such strong performances and such a contemporary idea at the center of it that it will be irresistible for the Academy, even though it is unlike many Academy-friendly movies. So that's 5 movies now that I've listed that I've greened here. I've got Anora, I've got The Brutalist, I think I've got Conclave, I've got Dune Part 2, and I've got Emilia Perez. So just walk with me in real time as I add these movies to the 10. How will I rank them? I don't know. Let's keep talking about these movies and let's see where we go next. After that film comes Gladiator 2. I won't spoil Gladiator 2 for you, but I did see Gladiator 2. Having seen it, I don't know if it's going to competing in this race. When we did the big Oscar bet with Amanda a few weeks ago, I was quite sure that this film would be competing and that this would be sort of the Barbie to Dune Part 2's Oppenheimer. You know, that this would be the candy-colored, fun night at the movies that is also a blockbuster that people really like and they have to admire. I think people are going to have a lot of fun with this movie. I'm not quite sure how seriously they're going to take it at this point. I'm leaning towards putting it in the Best Picture race at the moment, but I don't feel as strongly about it as before I saw it. That's not a negative review. You'll hear my review when we talk about the movie in about a month or so. It's just about how I think the movie will be understood that I'm talking about specifically. For the time being, I'm going to put it on the back end of the 10. So we will circle back to Gladiator 2 on our list here. After that is Hard Truths. This is a low-level contender. I think this is, if it's going to resonate anywhere, Mike Leigh's new movie, maybe his last movie based on how he's been talking about how the industry's been treating him recently, starring Marianne Jean-Baptiste in a thrilling performance. I think it's low level and probably only on a screenplay and acting side that it's going to get recognized here, if at all. We shall see, but I'm not adding it to the race at the moment. Now, here's two movies I haven't seen from two old masters. And so you never know what's going to happen with an old master. You know, is this going to be a Killers of the Flower Moon situation, or is it going to be a House of Gucci situation? Will it be clearly acknowledged as a great work from someone who's been making great movies for decades, or will it be politely ignored because of its relative absurdity? I'm talking about Here, the new movie from Robert Zemeckis, and I'm talking about Juror Number 2, the new movie from Clint Eastwood. Here is a film that is based on a graphic novel starring Tom Hanks and Robin Wright Penn reuniting with Zemeckis after their work 30 years ago in Forrest Gump. It also features a script from Eric Roth, also the screenwriter of Forrest Gump. Here is a movie that takes place entirely in one corner of the universe across seemingly thousands of years. This little corner, which represents a moment in time for the dinosaurs, a moment in time for the settlers of new lands, a moment of time for a nuclear family in America. I haven't seen this movie. I'm seeing it in 1 week. I am maybe the only optimistic man in the universe about this movie, but this is a boomer parade. This is a movie that will appeal to people who are Robert Zemeckis' age. His output in the last 15 years has been incredibly complicated and often not my favorite. Every once in a while, though, like in Flight, he rears back and grabs onto something that he was once able to tap into. So I'm not writing this movie off. I'm not putting it in my 10, but I'm not saying it is not a contender, even though no one seems to think it's a contender. We shall see. We will keep our powder dry on Here. Now, Juror Number 2 is a weird one because Juror Number 2 is 94-year-old Clint Eastwood's theoretical final film. It's a courtroom drama starring Nicholas Hoult and Toni Collette, two great actors. And the movie had been operating in the shadows for some time. Clint obviously works very efficiently. This film, I think, was originally planned for streaming. That's what the reporting is. And now it's getting rolled out in 50 screens for 1 weekend on November 1st. Paradoxically, it's got an amazing trailer. Have you seen the trailer for Juror Number 2? Pretty great. A moody character piece about a guy who may or may not be on the jury of a crime he may or may not have committed. Incredible elevator pitch. The Academy loves Clint Eastwood. Complicated politics aside, they love Clint Eastwood's work and they've honored him many times over the years. I'm not writing this movie off either. It might just be a standard programmer from a guy who's made a lot of movies like this. Well, let's not forget, movies like Bloodwork, even though many people have forgotten about them. It's something he just likes, an entertaining film from time to time. But at his advanced age, this might be an opportunity to honor one of those masters. We shall see. So keep my powder dry on Juror Number 2 as well. There's Pablo Larraín's Maria. I think this movie is almost certainly only going to compete with Angelina Jolie in the Best Actress race, and she gives an exceptional performance in this movie as Maria Callas, the opera singer. This is the third in a trilogy of films about complicated and accomplished women in the 20th century that Larraín has made. The first two films were about Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and Princess Diana. I liked this movie. I think it's effective. I think Larraín has a very particular flavor, and if it doesn't click for you, it doesn't click for you. So I think it may be somewhat divisive for some viewers. We shall see. This is a Netflix film. It's coming in November. Next is Nickel Boys. I didn't have this movie in my big Oscar bet, and now I regret it. The movie was supposed to be released on October 25th. It's now been pushed to December 20th. It's obviously been pushed for award season purposes. I think that MGM Amazon know that they have a really great film on their hands. A film that I think will also be divisive, that uses a very unusual style of perspectival storytelling that we don't usually see at the movies. I don't want to give away too much about it. I did rave about it out of Telluride. It seemed like it was received even more warmly in New York. I think if I had to guess, I think it's getting in right now. So I'm just going to add Nickel Boys to this 10 list. Maybe that's a mistake. We shall see. I can see another film that it's going to be competing with, which makes me a little bit queasy that they're competing, but I do think that's the truth of the matter. Next on my list is Nosferatu. This is Robert Eggers' new film that comes out on Christmas. It's, of course, a retelling of the Vampire Tale, which is a part of movie history. There have been multiple Nosferatu movies. I think this is the 6th or 7th Nosferatu story that's been made for the movies. Eggers is a hard genre filmmaker. He made The Witch, he made The Lighthouse, he made The Northman. This is the first movie of his that does not begin with the word the. It does look like a handsomely mounted period piece. And so I think that there's a chance for some below the line looks. I mentioned with Chris Ryan on the show last week, Jaron Blaschke, his cinematographer, was recognized in 2019 for his work on The Lighthouse. I'm not ruling Nosferatu out. It is horror. As listeners of the show know, we love horror. The Academy doesn't really love horror. They really have to bend over backwards to acknowledge horror. It's only happened a handful of times. We just did a rewatchables on Silence of the Lambs. The only time a quote-unquote horror movie won Best Picture. Even then, it's not really a horror movie. So I'm not betting on Nosferatu, but I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to not bet on it either. Next is The Piano Lesson, which is Malcolm Washington's adaptation of the August Wilson play. Really like this movie out of Telluride as well. Malcolm is Denzel Washington's son. And, of course, Denzel is in the Oscar race in Gladiator 2. Very much in the Oscar race, I would say, having seen Gladiator 2 now. Malcolm has done an amazing job of adaptation in this work. I think unlike a lot of the recent August Wilson adaptations, including his own father's, this movie did not feel as claustrophobic to me. It felt more inherently cinematic. It felt more conceived beyond just the page. And I really liked what he did with it. And I really liked Danielle Deadwyler's performance. And I think it's going to get in. Now, it feels odd to put Nickel Boys against The Piano Lesson. Two young black filmmakers, two audacious adaptations of, historical stories. But they are sort of on each other's turf in some ways, and there's no denying that. So we'll see if they cancel each other out, for lack of a better phrase. I'm not so sure. Going down the list of the alphabet Queer, I mentioned Luca Guadagnino's new film starring Daniel Craig, which played at the New York Film Festival after debuting at Venice. I think this movie is just a little bit too abstract and esoteric to capture the traditional awards body attention. I do think Daniel Craig will get a lot of high marks for his work, but it just feels a little bit strange and psychedelic and patient in a way that many of these movies usually aren't. So I don't see Queer getting in. Then there's A Real Pain, which I've circled in orange. We don't talk about orange too much on this show. It's between yellow and red. But I feel like what's at the center of this story, which is about two cousins who go to visit the Poland and their grandmother's homeland after her passing, and visit concentration camps and reflect on their relationship and how they fit into the arc of history, is a really sensitive and also really funny movie that could only have been made by its director, Jesse Eisenberg, who is in the process of turning himself into a gifted filmmaker. And he's got this remarkable performance from Kieran Culkin right at the center of it. This just feels like the kind of movie that the Academy likes. It is intimate, but it has big ideas. It is far-reaching, but also never gets beyond its core characters. It's not strange, I think, to raise the specter of like an ordinary people, I think, when talking about a movie like this. So I've got A Real Pain going in. Okay, I think that gives me, I want to say that gives me 7 contenders right now. So, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 contenders right now. 9 contenders right now. Oh my goodness. All right, we're getting further down the list. A Real Pain. That's in. The Room Next Door. This is the new movie from Pedro Almodovar. Now, mixed reviews on this one out of the festivals. It did win the Golden Lion at Venice. It also got some strong reviews out of the New York Film Festival. Some Almodovar fans think this might be a lesser work because there's something lost in translation. With The Move, this is his first English language feature. It stars Tilda Swinton and Julianne Moore as longtime friends who had been out of touch for a spell and are reacquainted at a critical moment in their lives and what happens between them. Beautiful performances. As with any Almodovar movie, the colors, production design, costuming, tonality, music is ace. This did still feel a little slight to me relative to the history of his work. It's also an adaptation and not an original. And there's something about that adaptation that doesn't feel like it totally fits with his perspective. So I'm going to say this is out at the moment. I might be wrong about that, but I don't think it's going to make the cut, even though I did think it was going to make the cut back in the big Oscar bet days. Saturday Night, Jason Reitman's film, which Chris Ryan and I talked about a couple of weeks ago on the show, which I thought would be a bigger deal. And it doesn't seem like people care. It has not worked at the box office. It has not set aflame the ascendant careers of a bunch of young actors. It seems that young people don't give a shit about the origins of Saturday Night. And so while they're racing out to go see Terrifier 3, they're not racing out to go see Saturday Night. So I don't think it's going to make it into this race. I thought it was, honestly, after I saw it at Telluride. I was definitely higher on it then. I looked at it again. I see people's concerns. I see what they don't like about it. I had a fun time. I enjoyed it. But it is a movie with some flaw. Now, if an older audience in awards bodies start looking at it, is it possible that they turn their head around for it? It's possible. I don't yet know. We mentioned The Seed of the Sacred Fig on the episode about the New York Film Festival last week. Bobby and I talked about what that movie is and how it could compete. It's definitely a contender in the international race. It's the German entry. I don't think it's going to have enough strength to get into Best Picture, but you never know. You know, Amanda is very fond of saying, don't underestimate the international entries. As of right now, there are not very many on this list that I feel are going to make it, with the exception of Emilia Perez, which technically stars 2 American actors and doesn't totally feel like an international feature and is housed by Netflix. We don't have something like Anatomy of a Fall this year in the race. It doesn't seem like. So you never know. A Seed of the Sacred Fig or an All We Imagine Is Light could be getting into the race. We shall see. I'm not so sure at the moment. Then there's September 5th, another movie I talked about out of Telluride, which is about how ABC Sports covered the hostage crisis at the 72 Munich Olympics, and what an incredible real-time, real-life moment that was for those who are working as journalists and TV producers. Rock solid drama. Really, really good movie that obviously flatters the sensibilities of journalists and people who work in the media. Excellent performances from John Magaro and from Peter Sarsgaard. I liked this movie quite a bit. It is a little bit simple and down the middle, but it's possible that its economy will be rewarded because it is, again, a very easy movie to watch at a time when not all of these contenders are necessarily easy to watch. I think September 5 is going to get in today. Do I think it's in the top 5? I don't. I don't think it's in the top 5 of this race at all. But if I had to guess, I would say it's getting in. So September 5, that leaves us with a few more to talk about. Sing Sing. You know, Amanda and I did an episode about this, and we kind of wondered aloud in August, what's going on with this movie? Why is nobody getting a chance to see it? Why is the rollout working in this way? Is there something wrong with it? Was it mishandled? I don't really know. This is a prison drama about a arts rehabilitation program in which incarcerated men are able to perform theater, and by performing that theater, they're able to kind of process some of their pain and work through their time inside prison. And it creates this beautiful panoramic vision of humanity that most years would seem like a shoo-in with the Academy, especially with the performances at the center of it. I don't know why, but I'm having a hard time getting my head around it getting in. So let me just look at my list here before I do anything about Sing Sing. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 10 movies already in. And I don't know if I'm going to cut any of them for Sing Sing. So for now, I'm going to say no. 2 more movies to tell you about. One is Wicked Part 1. As you've heard me say on the show, I don't get it. The person who does get it is my daughter. My 3-year-old daughter has discovered the soundtrack to Wicked and is running her life. Defying Gravity is on in my home every night now. Every night. I've got my wife singing Defying Gravity. I've never seen this musical. Candidly, I don't totally understand the concept of the musical. I will see the movie. We will talk about the movie on this podcast, I promise you. Until then, it's possible it's an Oscar contender. It is a big, high production design musical starring some very well-known names with classical IP, so to speak, a sort of prequel to The Wizard of Oz. But I don't see it. It's a part 1. Part 1s, that never happens. They never get a look at something like this. So I'm going to say it's out. And then the last one's The Wild Robot. I had a great event at Vidiot's here in Los Angeles over the weekend with Chris Sanders, the director of the film. You know, he's directed many animated movies over the years, Lilo and Stitch, and How to Train Your Dragon. And I think this is his best movie. It's a really beautiful film about parenting and about training to be great. And I think it's a very relatable movie. It's a very beautiful movie. I was able to introduce the movie with my daughter at the live event on Sunday, and honestly, it was one of the proudest and most genuine moments of my entire life. And seeing it a second time kind of got my wheels turning on this. I'm not ready to put it in as like a wild card contender for this race, but if some of these movies that I'm talking about are not as well received, let's say Gladiator 2 doesn't go over as well as I thought it might go over, or let's just say Nickel Boys is too audacious, or let's say Anora doesn't hit the right notes with Academy voters. Watch out, for something like The Wild Robot. It's possible. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but it is possible. So I'm flagging it here for you. That's 26 contenders. I've boiled it down to 10. I'm going to tell you those 10 right now before I rank them. Okay, so I've got The Brutalist. I've got Conclave. I've got Dune Part 2. I've got Anora. I've got Emilia Perez. I've got Nickel Boys. I've got Gladiator 2. I've got The Piano Lesson. I've got A Real Pain. I've got September 5th. Am I way off base or is this really close? I hope this isn't spoiling anything for the conversation that I'm about to have with Amanda, but my gut instinct is that Anora is pretty high on this list. So why don't we work from the bottom down instead? I think number 10 right now is probably Nickel Boys because of its unusual structure, so I'm going to drop it there. Number 9, I'll say September 5th because it is a modest production, even though it is about a relevant real-world event and is staged expertly. After that, I'll say The Piano Lesson. Netflix is very good at getting nominations, struggles a little bit more with wins, but they're very good at getting nominations. Then I will go at number 7, A Real Pain. You know what? I'm going to hold that. I'm going to put A Real Pain at number 6 because I think this movie's going to work. It debuted at Sundance, and I haven't met a person who doesn't like it. So I'm going to put that at 6. I'm going to put Gladiator 2 at 7. I could be wrong here. The Gladiator 2 one's thrown me for a loop. All right, so now I've got my 5 greens, my 5 locks. And if these movies end up not making it into the race, hey, it's October 21st. Give me a freaking break. Number 5, I believe, is Dune Part 2. People like it. They admire it. It's a lot of fun. It was a long time ago. They're going to have to work hard to get people back invested in this movie. I'm very invested in this movie. I kind of want to do another episode about this movie. Should we do another episode about Dune Part 2? Maybe we will revisit it early next year because it will be contending at least for a lot of below-the-line categories because there are not very many big films that are going to be competing in visual effects and costumes and hair and makeup, and I expect Dune Part 2 to be present in all of those categories. At number 4, I'm going to go Conclave, a movie everybody's going to like, everybody's going to enjoy spending time with. I'm not sure anybody's going to think too deeply about its themes. Number 3, I'm going The Brutalist. It's challenging. It's bold. It's big. It's deep. It makes some really, really complex choices in its second half that are going to rub people the wrong way. I look forward to talking about them. Adam Naiman has been reaching out to me nonstop. He's just been saying, Sean, when will we talk about The Brutalist? I have so many thoughts. I have so many things I would like to joust with you about. I promise you, Adam, you will be on the show. We will talk about The Brutalist together. Number 2, Emilia Perez. This movie could be at number 1. I think I'm going with Anora number 1. I think Anora is the movie, and especially now that I see that audiences are seeing it in New York and Los Angeles and starting to see it around the country, and I think it had the second highest per screen average over the weekend since the pandemic era, and it made $105,000 per screen over this first release weekend. People are loving this movie. The word of mouth is strong. Mikey Madison's performance as a sex worker who finds herself ensnared in this incredible romance with a Russian oligarch's son has just captured something. I hope this movie spreads widely more quickly. I hope they don't sit on it, but I'm not an award season strategist. I'm just a person who wants people to see movies. With that, let's now go to my conversation about Anora with Amanda Dobbins. Today on the show, we are discussing the Palme d'Or winning sensation, the 8th feature film from Baker, one of the most anticipated movies of the year. Amanda, we're doing it from the past into the future with you.
Thank you for agreeing to pre-tape so that I could talk about this. Probably one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie.
I was wondering if it will stack up and be that for you.
I mean, I think probably given how many movies I'm going to be able to see. But right now, as of recording, yeah, it's up there.
So it's Anora and then Longlegs after that. And then what comes after that?
And then Challengers.
Okay.
And then The Brutalist, which is, I had some extra space in my garage. And so...
storing some canisters?
Yeah, the canisters have found a home here in Los Angeles. I'm tending to them every night.
It's nice that
and then screening personally, It's
nice that the October listeners also get some Brutalist canister jokes.
Yeah.
Very, very generous of you. Anora, I agree. This is a wonderful movie, and I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but I'm always a little bit skeptical when a filmmaker that I really like gets anointed by
Right.
the cineasts at large. You know, the sort of like this Sean Baker I would not describe as like a very prestigious filmmaker in terms of the kinds of characters he portrays, the subject matter. His movies are pretty edgy. You know, they're often about sex workers. They're often very in your face. They're very comic. They're very explosive in the dynamics of the movies. So when I saw the words like Pretty Woman and Palme d'Or, I was like, what is how is this a Sean Baker movie?
I mean, this is, the indie band going mainstream in a lot of ways, both in terms of the reception and the fact that it did like win the Palme d'Or, and the subject matter, and even I would say the budget and the scope of the filmmaking.
Feels bigger.
Yeah, there are like set pieces in this movie. I mean, not like action, they're more comedic set pieces and they're incredible.
Yeah.
But it does seem like, Red Rocket and Tangerine and Florida Project were in awards conversations, and like cinephiles and people who know, and your best Letterboxd friend and everyone at the movie theater like knows about Sean Baker. And the profile has kind of been like steadily rising, but this is when everyone is like, oh, I know, I saw that film and I liked it. And I understand that kind of like hipster impulse to be like, no, this is my guy.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to gatekeep Sean Baker's work. Obviously, he's had incredible success. I think Florida Project was when he kind of entered something closer to mainstream. He cast Willem Dafoe in that movie, easily the most famous actor that he'd worked with to that moment. But he's had a really, really interesting career. And I have been saying that I see Anora as sort of the culmination of all the ideas that he's interested in. It is a bigger movie. When we talked with Adam Naiman on the show, coming out of TIFF, he talked about the idea of like excess and wealth being a core topic of this movie is interesting because it also sort of mirrors the elevation.
The gentrification of the Sean Baker milieu, which is like half true.
Yeah. And I think the movie is pretty skeptical of wealth.
It totally
and
is,
power
but
and
it
money
is also, as we said, it is like the settings are slightly different, and even what is shown, even if it's shown in a skeptical or cynical way, it is very different from what's shown in the Florida Project.
Totally, and even its representation of money and power is really gauche, which makes it clear, like I think, where the filmmakers stand on all these things. But let's just say, for anyone who's not familiar with what this movie is, it stars Mikey Madison and Mark Edelstein, Yura Borisov, Karen Kukulian. It's effectively a whirling dervish romantic comedy cloaked in an intense New York City thriller. Is that an accurate description of what's happening in the movie?
I mean, I would say that the Mad Libs of the description have been like if the Safdies did Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Uncut Gems meets Pretty Woman. And the Pretty Woman thing is, here's the basic premise. A stripper meets a young rich guy, the son of a Russian oligarch, and then they spend a week together, And by the way, the negotiating of the terms of the week have a direct call out to Pretty Woman. Like, I would have stayed for 10, I would have paid you 20, which is the what Richard Gere and Julia Roberts say to each other. So there's a reason that wonderful film that is now really old and
somewhat dated.
Certainly dated, but also like essential to my generation's understanding of the world is referenced because it is sort of the same thing. And also it's completely different.
We keep getting these movies that I think are interesting collision points for our taste and point of view, where you get like hardcore filmmakers with serious vision and themes that they return to over and over again. But sometimes their reference points cross over hard, either with my taste or your taste.
Yeah.
So this one is a really interesting one. If you keep hearing Pretty Woman, I think you're going there is a kind of like epic magnetism, star-making quality to Mikey Madison's performance as Anora, Annie, the Uzbek American girl who is a stripper in this club who meets this rich Russian kid. But this is still a very grimy, kind of down and dirty movie.
Yeah.
And so its emergence is so interesting to me because I think people like us are like selling it as something very commercial. And I'm like, this is a dingy as fuck movie from Sean Baker.
It totally is. And it's like, filmed like in strip clubs and with like real strippers and sex workers who are awesome, by the way. You should seek out their interviews, particularly in New York Magazine that they did at Cannes, just like on the beach. they're so great. But in addition to the Pretty Woman setup, and in addition to everything that feels grimy and stressful and, Uncut Gems or After Hours or whatever about it, there is also like true screwball comedy DNA in it. And my favorite scene, and you and I were just sitting next to each other, just like truly laughing out loud. And like, there's just like a 20-minute up the ante, like could almost be out of My Cousin Vinny, like scene 3/4 of the way through the movie. And so it is both.
Are you talking about the boardwalk?
I'm talking about
the
courtroom scene.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are a few. It's funny that you say that because there are a few of those moments. The movie, I think one of the great things about the movie is that it feels scary and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
And a part of that is a credit to the kind of like pace and the editing and the rhythm that Baker creates, and also this like heightened level of realistic but absurd performance style. For Red Rocket, Baker talked a lot about Italian comedies as like the framework for that movie, which was this movie about an ex-porn star who moves back to his hometown in southern Texas.
This movie.
Great movie, Simon Rex, hilarious performance. That movie was more overtly a comedy. It was a black comedy, but it was clearly a comedy, even though its ideas were about like, Donald Trump's America.
And even though in a lot of ways, like it's grimy, even grimier. I don't know. The stakes are smaller, but also like the emotions and the situations are skeevier.
It's uncomfortable at times, for sure. And in part because there's like a younger girl that is involved in a romantic affair with this older man. This movie, it doesn't quite feel like as overtly comic, even though it is very funny. And it has that feeling where sometimes you're like, am I supposed to be laughing at this? Is the feeling that you're having? Because I think, especially by the time you get to the end of this film, without quite spoiling it yet, there's a sense of sadness and even tragedy to the film too. So part of what is like the major achievement of it for me is that it's not choosing to be just Pretty Woman and the girl ends up with the guy. It's choosing not just to be Uncut Gems, where it's like, we're all gonna die, and like life is a hopeless pit of despair. It's kind of it's closer to real life, which is it is this complex stew, and sometimes it tastes bitter and sometimes it tastes sweet, and it's like a real sticking the landing quality to the feeling of blending all these different performance styles and genre styles and emotions into one stew.
Yeah, I also think it does just open up like the Sean Baker experience just a little bit. And I think that there is a reason that this is the movie that is being, we don't know, but so far the most widely celebrated of his films. And you and I think its Oscar chances are like surprisingly good for a movie, with as many lap dances as are presented in the first minutes and like beautifully done, by the way.
Yes.
But there is something for all of the specific peculiarity and I think the very close observations about sex work and class and money and this particular enclave of New York and, and young people and everything that is so fine-tuned to the situation, but it also just like, It has that thing that a lot of movies can't nail down, where it just like it feels accessible. Like there's some way that you can grab onto it, even if you've never been to a strip club in Coney Island or Brighton Beach. And I feel like that's just kind of cinema magic that you don't nail down every once in a while. It's just kind of like, oh, we got it all together, and the balance is just right.
I agree. There is an alchemical feeling in the movie. It's an interesting movie. This is a long movie. This is the longest movie that Baker has made. His movies are essentially getting longer and longer, which I find interesting. He's kind of like inching toward his own concept of the American epic, and all of his movies are very much about America, very much about immigrants, very much. I'm not referencing The Brutalist. It's number one contender in the Best Picture race. I'm merely referencing the scope of the story that Baker is making here. And the fact that it is a movie about foreign power intersecting with like helpless Americans too, which I find to be an amusing twist on a lot of what he has explored. A lot of times, his stories are about people who are who come to this country or who are like stuck here and feel like helpless. And part of what's interesting about the movie is that Annie, this stripper sex worker who spends the week, thinks she has like sincerely found a way out. She's
Mhm.
sincerely found her Prince Charming. She's sincerely found, and she's a very savvy woman who, working in a club like that, you have to be savvy. She is working hard. She's like trying to save money, but she's, she gets duped. Like this movie is about like, be careful about getting duped into thinking that everything is going to work out, because it might not work out.
Yeah, but she is, and it's an incredible Mikey Madison performance because she manages both to convey that sense that she is in control until she's not. And there are a couple scary sequences where you're just like, oh, this is like really, really not good. But that this is a person who seems clearer-eyed than most about what she's getting into.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as she's getting duped, it's like, how much is she being duped and how much is she duping herself? And how much is, willing to let go of that, like,
well, what do you think it
edge?
is? That's an interesting point.
I kind of veer towards the latter a little bit.
She knows that this romance that is burgeoning between her and this man.
I don't think she knows. I mean, she's like 20 years old, but there's an extraordinary scene that sets up the proposal, if you will, if such as it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not quite an episode of The Bachelor.
In Las Vegas. Well, it's in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Well.
And it's in the middle of some other activities.
Uh-huh.
There is a discussion of green cards and also just general being able to avoid going home to Russia, even in the context of the marriage. So her face is incredible and she's thinking through it. And you see her like wanting to, like, I guess you don't know whether she's like wanting to believe in the reality, like this is a love offer, or just like, oh, wow, like I could marry this person and like I hit the jackpot, or this seems like a good situation.
Feels like all of it is true.
All of it's true. And you can also see in her face, like, this can't be for real. Like, this seems ridiculous. I know better than this. I'm tough. So she is able to communicate it all at once. But I do, as things unravel or proceed, depending on your perspective, I guess, you do see her kind of realizing, I don't know how much fairy tale is going on by the end. Yeah, like she seems clued in pretty fast.
It's hard to say. I mean, she's obviously a woman of not much means. She's got a roommate, which we see very, vanishingly briefly. And she's trying to basically like get out of the life that she has been consigned to. The movie has this really clever structure where the first 45 minutes is just up, up, up. The mania of falling in love, finally having some access to some money.
Doing a lot of cocaine.
Sex, drugs. Mikey Madison is just bearing all in the movie multiple times. It is a very like forthright movie about sex and strippers. And
she does a pole dance to rival Jennifer Lopez's in Hustlers.
Very impressive. You said she
I literally turned to you.
Months.
I was like, that's really hard.
You did.
That is really hard. So
she's very credible.
Physical.
I can say that. The second 45 minutes is the jig is up, and we realize that this young oligarch's son maybe doesn't have as much control over his life as he might hope he does, and that there is in fact a series of people who work for his family who are meant to keep him in line, and they intersect with Anora, who is like a firecracker. She's uncontainable, and the sequence when they eventually come to the house where they're living in Brooklyn is amazing. I mean, it is like a truly scary and funny and you said My Cousin Vinny about the courtroom scene, but this is what I thought you were talking about. Because that kind of like rageful hilarity is what I think the movie does really well.
Yes.
Where like you're really afraid for Anora at certain points of this sequence, but Yura Borisov's character is so strange and so very quietly but immediately falling in love with her in that first moment that he encounters her, and he's basically playing a kind of a thug, a body man for this attaché to the oligarchs. So the movie has this unusual fizz to it,
and all three of the guys, the henchmen, if you for lack of a better term, are like immediately communicating both like a threat and also just we don't quite have this pinned down ourselves, you know, that it's, and
there's an incompetence.
Yeah.
She surprised them with her intensity.
Right. Which it does, or at least I read as like, oh, okay. So it's not, this isn't, it reassures you a little bit.
Right. This
as
isn't
an audience
Goodfellas,
member.
you know?
Exactly. And even as you're like, oh no, this is really bad, it is also communicating the comedy of also like none of these people are going to do what you expect them to do. And then the amazing thing about it, and I don't say this to say that the scenes feel long, but like they keep going. That scene just like, and it like keeps escalating. It's really like yes anding, but like a very, very uncomfortable but funny scene. And the tension keeps going. It's amazing.
I think because you don't know anything about any of these characters who just pop in, you know, halfway through the movie, they could shoot her in the head. You know, you don't know. We really don't know how intense this is going to be.
The one guy who's like the ostensibly in charge, the Godfather, who's also the priest,
Karen Karagulian,
yes, and who's like a recurring actor in Baker's
every Sean
films.
Baker movie,
And I mean, they set him up, but like he's just like consistently like being interrupted at various church functions. To take phone calls
him
to
leaving
find
the
out
blessing
like
of the
things going on.
child. That's the best. It's so
but
funny.
That does also like telegraph to you, okay, like this is a person who doesn't quite have the lock on everything.
Right. And also he's not a cold-blooded murderer.
Right.
Like he's basically a pastor. Yeah, the movie is really, really funny, but because of the way it's shot, I think too, it doesn't look like it has been like set designed, and it's not like, you know, lit in the way that a Hollywood movie is lit. So you almost are like thinking you're like peering in on somebody getting abducted during some of those sequences.
Right.
Until it becomes this movie that is effectively like a detective chase sequence, you know, where this quartet of extremely unhappy people are stuck together in a car roaming around
trying to find a parking
Coney
spot.
Island. Yeah. I mean, great movie about parking in New York, especially in Brooklyn. Very, very funny. And it's interesting because Mark Edelstein, like the Russian actor who is such a propulsive force in the first half of the movie, basically disappears because he vanishes in the middle of the movie.
Right.
And so it becomes this much more like Motley Crue, almost like a Three Stooges movie. If Marilyn Monroe joined the Three Stooges, it's such a funny combination of actors and personalities that it's a really interestingly successful movie. Let's talk a little bit about the third act without spoiling it.
Okay.
So I would say that I started to get a little bit concerned about what the story was becoming. And I think as the more I've thought about it, if that second act is this like the kind of frenzy after the romance, the third act is this really like sad, depressurizing reality check on what it really means. Honestly, I think to just be poor in America. Like, I think that that's ultimately what this movie is about, is like, if you are lacking power, it's really hard to shortcut your way out of that power in this American system that we have here.
And the third act is really like her watching that chance slip away. And honestly, like financially, not like emotionally. And I don't mean that to never for a second like disliked the Annie character or thought she was shallow. Like, I'm just like, you know, it's a modern day Cinderella. I'm rooting for her to get it. But like, that means me literally thinking, because at some point, spoiler alert, she winds up like in a, you know, clerk's office in Las Vegas County or whatever. And they're like, you have to sign the annulment. And I'm just like, no, you don't. Don't do it. You know?
Yeah. It was like a horror movie in that scene.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But you are also like rooting for her. You're just like, no. Like, hold on. You can do it. You've got them. But like everything from that absolutely amazing courtroom scene on is watching like her power, which in this movie is like almost is money. Like, that's what it is. Kind of slowly, gradually.
Right.
And you just realize she doesn't have the resources, and she doesn't have like, I mean, she doesn't have the money, but also is like on her own, stacked up against all of these people. And there you just, the system, you can't win. And it's builds to that realization, but like very, it's funny, but also very sad.
Well, so let's talk about the ending, like
Yeah.
the proper spoiler alert for the end of the movie. I'm very sorry to Bobby and Jack who have not seen this movie. It's a tough one, but we're gonna spoil it, guys. This is your job, so that's what the money is for. Is
Yeah.
getting Anora spoiled for you on this podcast
Sorry,
a month
guys.
before it comes out.
Hazards of the job, Some guys used to have to wear hard hats, and here I am just knowing
Yeah.
what's happening in the third act of Sean Baker films.
Yeah.
Yeah, the swinging beams in this case are our takes about the ending of Anora. So you're not actually in any.
Sometimes it feels
physical
that way.
danger. Spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't want to know how the film concludes. We've shared like some kind of critical shape of the story.
I mean, I think
but
everybody knows that she doesn't like get a $1 billion settlement and like run away happy ever after.
Was there ever a time when you were watching it where you thought she could? Because okay. Let me just say this.
Yeah.
The Caragulian character the entire time is like, we're getting this annulled.
Yeah,
They go to the New York court to get it annulled, and
and then they
the court
discover
officer
in the
is like,
courtroom there it's like, no, this
was a Nevada
it was
wedding.
in Vegas, and they're like, you went to Nevada, and then everyone's like screaming, and the Mark Adelstein character is so drunk and high at this point that he just like is like a corpse falling over, and Annie is still like holding her on in this moment, being like, it's
but,
really
okay.
really
So
good.
when they go to Nevada, were you like, she's gonna get $1 million, $5 million? Like,
I was sitting there, and this is like, this is I was invested, but this is my 40 years of living on this earth and all my like women's magazine training. I was just like, you hold in that negotiation. Annie, you sit in front of these fucking scary oligarchs who have hitmen on their payroll, and you just tell them, no, I won't, and then like, and I like the closer the mom figure gets, I was like, oh no, you can't do it. But I wanted to believe that, I was rooting for her.
I was rooting for her too, which is the movie keeps you on her side the whole time. It becomes clear that, in fact, she's going to have to settle for, is it $10,000 ultimately, and signing the annulment agreement in Nevada, and effectively be left with nothing but the memory of a crazy week with this Russian oligarch's son, and also the sort of protection and temporary companionship of Yura Borisov's character, who had Igor, who has been simultaneously physically transporting her, but also assuaging her and sort of clearly falling in love with her throughout all of this. And the movie ends in this really interesting way where you have a very quiet night after they've returned from Nevada, where Igor is like watching her as she spends her final evening in this lavish house that has been rented for her now ex-husband.
Right.
And they have this like...
Is it ex-husband if it's annulled?
I don't know what the nomenclature is, but I will get a divorce attorney on the
Nevada
phone right
divorce
now.
Attorney? Okay,
Bob,
thank
please
you.
call my divorce attorney. Her ex. And they have this fascinating moment where she's watching TV and she's being really rude to him. And he's like very calmly and almost patiently and almost like affectionately but obsessively like doting upon her, but also like undermining her a little bit too while they're talking, because he's like, you have no power, and I saw how that played out.
Right, but like in a way where that he feels for her.
He does. He clearly
he is both the muscle and signals very clearly on that he is going to be physically protect her, even though he's there to smash heads.
So the following day, she's leaving this house and being transported back to her apartment. And the movie is really moving at this furious pace for 2 hours. And I must say, this is an amazingly well-edited movie. As usual, it's edited by Baker, who does all that stuff himself. We get to this moment in the car where kind of like everything has hit her all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking, and we see that there is like a kind of chemistry between her and Igor.
It's been simmering.
Yeah. But like maybe this could be actually like a real relationship, and they're kind of communicating in a way that isn't like just undermining each other. And she's about to get out of the car and go up to her apartment, and she comes back quickly and she embraces him, and they have sex in the car, and she breaks down sort of mid sex. And has this kind of like, it's somewhere between a release and a crash.
Yes.
And it's a fascinating choice because the movie effectively ends there. And
wordless.
Right. No, there's nothing said between them during this sex scene, which is very, very intense and just held on one shot. Very intimate moment in the movie. And I've been chewing on it since I saw it. I've been trying to think about what this is saying to us. Now, obviously, Annie is a character who like gets what she wants with her body, with sex. That has been like her pathway to financial gain. It led to this relationship. It's something she knows how to do and she knows how powerful it is. But also she seems to be confronted by this like really thundering understanding that like she might be screwed. She might be like stuck.
Yeah.
And maybe someone like Igor would be good for her. But also, is this just like another stop on the highway of endless, fruitless life? I guess I'm trying to figure out like, how did you feel? What did you feel that the ending of the movie is trying to tell you?
I took it more as maybe not. I mean, like release, like the facade, the tough, the performance of Annie finally like coming down. Because she is throughout, and even when things don't break her way, and she signs the annulment. She's not vulnerable, or she is not admitting vulnerability, even as she is in like very vulnerable positions. And she is projecting that she is in control and making decisions for herself, even when she's not. And that's a huge part of her identity, and certainly like her job and what she does as she interacts with all these people. And, you know, you can sense the chemistry between them. And the night before, you're right that he's pushing back a little, but she's mean to him. She like throws him like a blanket or something to sleep on the couch. She's like still kind of doing the power play.
She is, yeah.
And so it seems like she has sex with him, or initiates sex with him, because she initiates it in order to kind of like continue that idea of power and, you know, be like, this is still what I do and this is how I know how to do it. And then it like, she reaches the limit,
right? So
of the ability I don't know, because it's unfair to say that's delusion.
Just a performance of control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think I interpreted a lot of it as like a reaction to everything that happens in the last week. Like,
but also maybe her whole life. Like that's what I was thinking, that it is like a little bit of, I say crash.
I mean, and there is just also like a, you know, sometimes like the human body physically expresses what emotionally you don't.
Yeah.
You like keep bound up. And so that's like a very apt physical expression and like in a very apt physical situation of just overwhelming, and her like not being able to do the hard, you know, the hard talking anymore.
Yeah. It's very effective.
Yeah.
I had been, you know, we had a chance to see it after Cannes, but before these most recent fall festivals. And I think we both said when we came out, we were like, whoa, I was not expecting that ending, basically.
Yeah. Because as you said, the movie is just moving. And then much like the final scene, it's just kind of like, okay, now we can't do that, you know?
Right.
We'd like downshift very fast. And
I had been expecting people to be hit hard by it.
Yeah.
But also maybe not coming out of the movie and being like, oh my God, I love this movie. Because it is, you know, like all Sean Baker. I mean, the Florida Project is like devastating in terms of what it's trying to say about.
The Florida Project is like, I can't. I mean,
it's painful to watch. I mean, Tangerine, which is like very fun and funny, is also very hard to watch at times. And this movie is not pulling any punches. Like when we get on podcasts and we're like, oh my God, Best Picture frontrunner or whatever about movies like this. Like, that's fucking weird. Now, obviously, Parasite and Moonlight, like these movies are not like conventional Best Picture frontrunners, and things have changed. But it was interesting when I was in Telluride when everyone was like, Anora is the hottest ticket. I had so much fun. And I'm like, this is a movie about how like being broke in America means you're fucked.
I will say I like the ending like really did emotionally like I had like almost like a similar physical and emotional, like I was up here and then I was like, whoop, you know, like you could like chart it on one of those voter, you know, live reaction things.
Mhm.
But I don't think I took it as
We should make one of those, like the Nate Cohn
I know.
line
It's like
for movie
my,
watching.
or like my needle goes like,
Yeah.
"Wah," you know? No, so I was on the ride.
Mhm.
And like you and I both got up and were just like, wow. You know, I remember that moment, but I also don't think I took it as, and now she will never recover and like
Yeah, okay.
life is ruined. And I think maybe that's a little bit because it's like, you know, a zany moment in this person's life. And also just because I think the performance in the character is so memorable that you're like, well, I'm still rooting, you know, for you. By the flip side, I don't think that I didn't walk out just being like, well, you know, it's America, so she'll have 18 million more chances. It's not like this is like a sunny version of how things work in this country, especially if, or when you have no money, but it still feels a little contained, the movie. There's like, I guess it's like the fairy tale aspect of it. So I don't know. I that's probably how I can still be like, wow, Anora, I loved it. What a ride, even though the emotion definitely intentionally crashes at the end.
Yeah, for sure. It almost like it feels like the air is slowly coming out of the balloon as you're watching the final 45 minutes of the movie. This is yet another example where Baker is so good at getting a place right. I've not been to the Gulf Coast of Texas, but it feels like when you're watching Red Rocket that he's got a handle on that. You know, like the exurbs of Orlando in the Florida Project, it just you feel like you understand that motel. I feel like that's a real place, you know, when you're sitting in it. I just mentioned that I just rewatched Takeout and like Chinatown and New York City at that time in that movie, Sunset Strip in Tangerine. Yeah. Most movies don't look like the world. And his movies look like the world.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's a magic trick or if it's his shooting style. You know, Tangerine is celebrated because it's like shot on iPhones. And so everything feels like you're watching somebody uploaded a YouTube video featuring these two characters. But I've been to Brighton Beach. I've been to Coney Island. Like that's what it is.
That's what it feels
like.
That's
what it is. There are weird Russian diners and clubs all along the strip there. There are places you wander into and you're like, I'm not supposed to be in here right now. Right. There are certainly those like mom and pop ice cream shops, you know, along the boardwalk, which figures prominently in that really funny sequence in this movie.
Funny.
There are kids like Mark Edelstein's character just bumming around, you know, spending thousands of dollars. So he's captured something that feels real with an energy that is almost impossible. That I just think it's like a huge accomplishment. You know, I think it's really unusual in movies to be able to bring something like this consistently and not have it be the same place. Like some filmmakers are really good. Martin Scorsese is really good in New York. You know what I mean?
Sure. He knows its ins and outs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean Baker is traveling the country.
That's true.
Consistently portraying this in different states and different energies and doing a fascinating job. So I think it's amazing. And then obviously you mentioned it, but this is your old school, we have another movie star kind of thing with Mikey Madison, who has a great face and is, I think, so good at that thing that you were describing where she just is performing the control and power that she learned on the job and that she needs to do to continue to survive. But so then when it cracks, like you really have to be able to deliver on the cracking. And it's really impressive. When I saw that she was cast, I was like, this is smart. I've seen her now in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Right.
I've seen her in Scream.
And she's memorable in both.
She very much is. And she's doing a similar but different thing, which is in both of those movies, she has a couple of moments where she's just like complete chaos, you know, where she's like flipping out and being lit on fire in both movies. And you're like, okay, this person she's a firecracker. She brings energy to your movie. But this part is so much more complex than those two movies that she had done prior to this. And I know she had been on better things.
Right. She has been around for a while. She also just has like a very memorable like face, but I don't think that we knew that it could quite communicate, you know, she can use it and do like lots of big emotions, but the small emotions are also like there behind the eyes and like very still, which you don't know until someone pulls it out.
Yeah. She was really great. The other thing I wanted to note about this movie is the music.
Yeah.
So I don't think I realized that the song Greatest Day, which plays a few times in this film, is a Take That song. Did you know that?
No, I only knew that after. Once again, my take that blindness.
Yeah.
I guess we need that weird robot documentary to be released. The one where Robbie Williams is played by a robot or something.
No, he's played by a digitally animated monkey.
Okay, sure.
And it's not a documentary. It's a scripted feature from the
That's
man.
right, actually, because when we were researching the Oscar bet, someone had Robbie Williams at like 3,000 to 1 odds.
I don't see that happen. I think he's only voicing the monkey.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that I see that happening
Okay.
anytime soon. It's a metaphor for how we're all monkeys made to dance when we work in the entertainment industry.
Once again, I just don't know what's going on with that whole segment of pop culture.
Just the Brits.
No, take that and its offshoot specifically.
Well, this song is used amazingly well.
It is.
It's more of a club remix of this song, but it's funny and ironic because it's obviously it is going to be the greatest day, and then it is not going to be the greatest day of our lives. But then Tattoo, All the Things She Said, which is just a certified pop banger and also the most Russian pop song of all time, which had to be in this movie by law. And then a bunch of, for lack of a nicer phrase, like stripper anthems, like Slater, Iggy Azalea, like white girl stripper songs.
Yeah, but the this great interview that I mentioned in Vulture, at some point they were talking about the specific music cues, and the actors in the movie were like, "Oh, he got that one from you," right? Like they were just like, "Oh, I love this one." It was like it feels
authentic.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it was.
Like I can't certify who gets credit for what, but they were very proud of it as well.
Yeah. And then just having Blondie on the soundtrack too, which is sort of like a band that you could see walking on Coney Island in the 1970s, and when they're a slightly more romantic version of this time. This is a great movie.
I loved it. It's wonderful.
Do you think it's gonna actually like do the Academy Awards run that we have been proclaiming it has been?
We're pre-taping.
Yeah.
We are taping this after we did our Oscar bets are in the world now. So I don't know how are they doing? Are people supportive?
I mean, we've only seen like 3/10 of all the movies, if not less. So I don't know. I don't think anybody is making any significant wagers based on our prognosticating.
No. I saw that they moved the markets, like Bill and Cousin Sal.
They did.
Oh, good.
And the casinos are currently going bankrupt because of the podcast. That's the impact.
Wow. The Amanda effect.
That's wonderful.
We love to hear it.
Yeah. So, we're still right now in very early days. But for a movie that is about how basically you're set up to fail in America, there's like a very winning quality to it, which is like so strange.
I know.
And part of its magic. And I don't think that the sex and nudity is going to be as much of a problem as I want,
So do you, I have been thinking about this, and I wanted to know what you thought.
Yeah.
Is that because culturally we are more comfortable with this kind of very straightforward portrayal of strip club culture,
right?
Sex work. Obviously, Baker is in part responsible, I think, for creating new levels of acceptance in this part of the world, like a movie like Tangerine or a movie like Florida Project getting celebrated in the way that it does.
Right.
Forces normie journalists to confront these ideas and talk about them out loud, or to write about them and to better understand them. And obviously, like, as a culture, are we getting more progressive and more thoughtful about some of these things? Or is it that female nudity is something that everybody is okay with all the time? And that's never been really an issue since like 1971?
Yeah, but I guess it's like a slightly different style of female nudity.
It feels
that is
more realistic, I guess.
More realistic, but
like,
also
Mikey Madison is making it clap in this movie. You know what I mean? It's not like she's definitely doing the strip club thing. Like it's not like it's not like some abstract expressionistic portrait of this culture. Like she's just a stripper.
Right. I think that we're probably as a culture more comfortable with that sort of intentional, she's naked and it's her job.
Mm-hmm.
Both as an actor, but also as the stripper, the sex worker, like within the movie. And it's kind of like, well, I do think, at least as far as like the Academy voters go, people have gotten a little bit more used to that. And also,
Yeah.
like that culture has just become more prevalent, like in our pop culture.
We
you know?
haven't seen Queer yet, but I was thinking that there might be an opportunity for a kind of triangulation between Queer, this film, and Challengers.
Right.
Where there's sort of like, Queer is a film that features a lot of gay sex scenes
Right.
with a movie star. Anora is a film that features a lot of straight sex scenes
Mm-hmm.
with an ascendant movie star. And then Challengers is probably the most sex-focused movie of the three movies,
Right.
with no
but the
sex
least
scenes.
sex. Yeah. Well, yeah.
One attempted sex
Sure.
scene that doesn't quite.
Yeah.
So, and we talked about, oh my God, what was the Netflix film last year?
Not the Netflix.
The erotic thriller that had some like,
Fair Play?
Fair Play, thank you.
Oh, right.
That had some like a somewhat aggressive
Sure.
portraits of like a certain kind of sex. And that got us
What
thinking
was
about
the
it.
other period sex last year?
Was
Because it was
Saltburn?
like 2 was a trend. Oh, sure. Yeah. And
Saltburn,
Saltburn,
yeah.
obviously.
But both of those were played for like, ooh.
Right. Scandal as
like,
opposed
wow,
to.
isn't that dangerous to show
Mhm.
that on screen? Whereas it feels like in Anora and in Challengers, it's
And then
more about power and less about shock value.
last year was also Poor Things,
Mm-hmm.
which
point.
was nudity and sex, but wrapped up in very beautiful costume dramas.
Fancy production design.
Yeah, and also portrayed as liberation
Mhm.
as opposed to
and farce and
Yes.
genre in a way that these movies we're talking about are not.
right.
That are.
I mean, still a weird movie, and I don't know if even 10 years ago people would have been like, "Oh yeah, Poor Things,
Mhm.
give it 45 Oscars."
I agree.
But there still is like there's less seaminess in Poor Things than there is in this. But I don't know. I think most people can grow up. I'm sure some people will clutch their pearls, but
You think Mikey Madison will win?
I mean, we both picked her.
Yeah.
It's such a good story, and the Oscars love an ingenue.
It's the thing they do in
And
this category.
I don't think that there is a like grande dame, respectfully, with a performance.
You haven't seen Maria.
Well, I know, but I don't think that that's gonna.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't respectfully.
Because like, if you look at those other contenders, I don't know if we mentioned this when we were doing the big Oscar bet, but it's like Tilda's won, Julianne Moore has won, Nicole Kidman has won, Angelina Jolie has won. Like,
yes,
they've all won. Amy Adams hasn't won, but I don't
Right.
think she's going to get nominated. But all
Saoirse
of
Ronan hasn't won, but once again, it's not her year.
not the best movie that she's going to be in that category for.
Yeah,
We'll see with Blitz and supporting. Maybe that solves that problem anyway. It's an interesting one. There's a world where this catches the wave and goes screenplay, actress, director, best picture, editing. Like, I could see it. There's also a world in which it's January and we're like, remember when we thought Anora was the front runner?
I mean, of
And
course,
it's like a
there's
very good movie that made
And then,
$11 million.
and then like Dune 2 is just
Yes. Or The
and-
Brutalist.
oh my god,
Or Saturday Night. Who knows? You never know.
that's true.
Important question for you. If a Russian oligarch fell in love with you and offered to
Okay.
whisk you away from
Yeah,
all
you
of
put
this
in the doc.
for a life of Call of Duty and morning sex, would you do it?
How old am I when I'm making the decision?
I think Annie's like 23, so you're 23.
So I'm 23.
Yeah.
And I know what I know at 23, or I know what Annie knows at 23.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Why not?
Okay. I would too.
Yeah.
Seems fun.
I mean, the Call of Duty is kind of a bummer.
I
But
was-
those scenes are so funny.
I was reminded of just how crazy it is to be like drinking vodka at 2:00 in the morning at
Yeah.
a club. I was like, it's been a long time since I did this. A really long time.
I was reminded
It
of
was
just,
fun to
like,
be 23.
how just absolutely lame it is to watch a dude play a video game,
Yeah.
It's
Fortunately, I'm
just-
innocent of all
it's
charges.
just such loser behavior. I know you all do it, but like having to sit there, there's nothing lamer.
I can't think of a better way to end this conversation than on that note. Amanda, thank you. Thanks to Amanda, of course, we miss her on the show. Thanks to Jack Sanders, Thanks to our producer, Bobby Wagner, for his work on today's episode. Later this week on the show, we have a special bonus, the Slasher Movie Hall of Fame, a megapod with Pavement's director and returning champion on The Big Picture, Alex Ross Perry. He's the homie. We'll see you then.